All right, so as many of you may know by now, Piers Morgan hosts a show called Piers Morgan Uncensored. Now, I have a little bit of mixed feelings about this show. So, on one hand, obviously there's the political theatrics of it in the sense that it's oftentimes, from what I see, people going back and forth, a lot of yelling, not a lot of just talking over each other, all that kind of stuff. Not that that's all of what it is, but it's certainly there. It's certainly there to some significant degree, I'd say. And I think when I look at that initially, it's one of those things where you're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place, right? Because on one hand, it's like, well, obviously you don't want discourse to look like this, right? But on the other hand, it's like, is it worth it to have this type of discourse for there to be discourse per se, right? And I think that is kind of the ever-living battle sort of going on with this kind of situation. Obviously, the hope is that one day we can move to a spot where, we can have these kind of cordial conversations and they become just way more popular than this kind of thing. But from a moral perspective, I actually don't know, as the state is right now, I don't know which one is worse. I think you can make an argument for either, that it's just bad, or that you could say, well, at least it is getting people engaged. But we'll get back to that in a bit. But first, I want to play you a bit from the conversation he had with Ben Shapiro. And then we're going to go to a different video involving something from Instagram, and then also involving Dave Rubin as well. But first, let's go ahead and watch this from Piers Morgan. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the first 2 minutes of this, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about it, and then I'm going to skip ahead to 2 points that I think are important and will serve a more general conversation about the state of political discourse and what it ought to be, and then we'll move on to the other stuff on Instagram and the other YouTube video from Rubin, like I said. So first, let's go ahead and watch this.
Ben Shapiro is undoubtedly an intelligent and influential commentator. I've always liked and respected him, even when we disagree. And I still do. He's stridently partisan and staunchly conservative, of course, but he's willing to criticize Trump and others in the administration when he thinks they've got it wrong. Well, one thing he doesn't criticize, however, is Israel. And he routinely gets very upset when other people do. It's such a blind spot for Ben that through the red mist of his rage, he sees an alternate reality where anybody who disagrees with him is a demonic, America-hating terror apologist who can only possibly be doing it for ratings. And it was brought to my attention that he was very upset about a debate last week featuring Dave Smith.
So last night on Piers Morgan, which is the Jerry Springer of political television, where people gather to throw chairs at one another and determine paternity. Piers Morgan, who has sort of made a mockery of the entire industry by putting on screen whatever dregs are still willing to go on screen with Piers Morgan. He had on Dave Smith, who has, apparently his job is never to tell jokes, but to instead give poorly informed foreign policy takes. And also to hate America. Here we go.
Well, first, Jerry Springer was a very good friend of mine, and he was a beloved national treasure who actually hosted one of the most successful shows in television history and became a media mogul worth hundreds of millions of dollars. So thank you for that comparison, Ben. Second, we proudly host lively debates on things that people care about, featuring guests that people care about, to cover both sides of complex news stories in an engaging way. Do the debates sometimes get a bit combative? Yes. Do audiences tend to enjoy a bit of theatrical rough and tumble? Of course they do. That's why the Daily Wire, Ben's company, has an entire political debate show which is literally called Bar Fight. That's why Ben's own show features hard-hitting segments including Ben Shapiro destroys celebrity ice reactions. Ben Shapiro destroys the Golden Globes. Ben Shapiro reacts to woke TikToks.
Okay, so there you can see, obviously, sort of the dynamic that I'm talking about, right? It's like even Piers is kind of alluding to the theatrics, or maybe he wouldn't quite put it that way, of the show, right? The entertainment aspect of it. And specifically, it seems to be talking to here about how Ben also does sort of similar things. Now, I want to stress here, I'm really not fully doing a critique on this video per se, so if there's something I'm missing in context, obviously if you feel free to tell me, but the purpose of this is not to fully talk about this video. The purpose of this is to kind of have a more general narrative about political conversations, how they're sold, what the pros and cons of all these things are in general. So we're going to continue with that, and just keep that in mind. But I want to continue with this video because there's a couple other things where I think a really important aspect of platforming comes up. So let's watch this. There's two things I'm going to just kind of quickly fast forward to. And like I said, encourage you guys to watch this whole thing for fuller context. But let's take a look at that.
Take Piers Morgan, of course, suggesting the only reason that I was not appearing on his show anymore was his criticism of Israel, which is weird because I appeared on his show for literally months after October 7th, even though he was already critical of Israel. And I really haven't said anything on Piers or about Piers or to Piers for probably a year. I just stopped appearing on his show. Why? Well, honestly, he kept bringing on actual Nazis and the Nazi adjacent, and then treated them all too often as voices worthy of a large audience. Like, for example, these people.
I believe that Jewish supremacy is the greatest threat to America, and I think it's the greatest threat to the world today. I truly believe that.
You think Hitler was very cool?
Yes, I do.
One of them.
And I'm tired of pretending he's not.
It's going to be the headlines tomorrow. Piers Morgan, Israel is ISIS.
Only amongst people who weren't listening.
That's how I feel about those young men in Gaza. You ask me why I won't condemn them. Because those young men were born into a concentration camp.
You don't think they have?
Has been a terrorist state. Okay, Israel right now is imparting a genocide and a Holocaust on the Gazan people.
Listen, it's Piers' choice who he decides to have on his show and how he decides to conduct the kind of clown car battle royale that he does on a show every night. And it's my choice not to join that circus. We all make our choices and we all live with them, but some of us make our choices based on, actual principles and not the clicks.
Well, the last time Ben Shapiro...
So Piers says a little bit here. Again, watch your full context if you want to. But then one of the things he does is he actually counters that with a compilation of his own. And again, I think this goes to like a larger platforming thing that I think is really important to discuss. So let's watch this end of basically what is the compilation of Piers and his team after seeing the compilation of the Ben and his team put together.
One of them about things I didn't agree with. His montage of the same interviews could have looked like this. You sound like a Nazi.
I mean, why do you say that?
That's literally what Nazis would have said in World War II. You think if half your family had been wiped out by very fucking cool Hitler, you'd still think he was very fucking cool? Or would you think that actually he was a despicable monster who murdered 12 million people? The comparison, which is more apposite, is ISIS and Hamas. They are both nihilistic terror groups intent on killing as many Jewish people and others as they can possibly kill. That's not true.
As the numbers... Okay.
It's just not true.
Piers...
Well, Professor, with respect...
Okay, I'm not going to...
It's not true.
Piers. Yeah, but you have to listen to what I say.
But you want me to believe you when you say you weren't aware of the scale of this for several days. I find that just... I'm incredulous that you want me to believe that.
This country, which was formed in 1948 by pretending to be refugees, if you will, and being invited into the homes of Palestinians, the horrific story of what happened.
Well, they weren't pretending to be refugees. They were people fleeing a Holocaust. You can take the view, as many do, that interviewing...
So, look, obviously a little bit there of, like, Piers saying, look, no, we're not doing what you think we're doing, Ben. We're not doing that. We are criticizing people. We are having them on, but we're criticizing them. And I actually think that, again, not having known the full context of everything here, even myself, generally speaking, 1,000%, I think platforming people is fine, but you have got to be there for the critique. So I think as long as Piers or whoever is having these people on, but is hammering them on whatever he thinks is wrong, I think that's reasonable. And I think this goes to a larger point, too, of like, how do we handle these type of disagreements, right? Because obviously the goal is going to be as cordial as possible, talk things out one-on-one, have good faith conversations. Don't assume someone's bad just because of X or Y or Z. 100%. That is always the goal. But when you have people on who have truly abhorrent views, there is nothing wrong with assertively saying that is just a load of bullshit, frankly. You can say that. there is room for that in a polite society. Not only is there room for it, it's necessary. It has to happen. It has to happen. Again, not saying that is always the goal, but sometimes it has to happen. And on top of that, sometimes you also get people who, and I talked about this a little bit in one of our larger conversations with a youth pastor that I haven't posted yet, but we'll get to that. I'll post that at some point. There is like, what do you do with people who are not fully honest actors, or you feel like are always picking their side 100%? You're not at that point, you're not engaging with someone who is serious about moving the dialogue forward. And so how you handle that is going to be a little bit different. You might be assertive or more assertive. You might be like, look, dude, I think you're honestly, I think you're full of shit. Sometimes you need that. Again, that's not the goal. I don't want to be there. No one should want to be there. Okay? If you want to do negotiations that are friendly, but then someone doesn't want to be friendly in those negotiations, if they want to be rude, if they want to be disrespectful, if they want to be whatever it is, well, then if you're just like, yeah, there's a part of it that's like, be the bigger man, sure, but there's also a part of it that's like, well, I actually have a responsibility to call you out on your bullshit and be a little assertive in some situations. So I think that aspect of it is a little complicated, but I wanted to pull this other thing here. This is from Instagram, actually, and this is a person that I have followed, and their name is Hey, It's Twig. Now, if you look at this person's posts, they very much give like activist vibes, so to speak, which I don't think is necessarily a problem. But there's a conversation here that I want to watch, and then we'll get back to talking about it, because I think there is, again, the nuance comes up here of like, how do you handle people how do you handle people in certain situations? Who should you handle in different ways? All that kind of thing. So let's watch this real quick.
Shut up when I'm talking to you! No. You need a trazodone. You support pedophiles. That's what we know. You're a pedophile supporter. 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 La 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 la. You're a pedophile supporter. 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 Are you tired yet? You're shaking a little bit.
Epstein files are here.
Oh, he got the files. He brought out the files.
You got him this time. I'm taking him now. This time.
Shut up.
Okay, so look, this goes back to what I was talking about before, right? It's like, okay, this person, are they engaged with someone who perhaps is not good faith? I don't know the whole context of this, so I'm not going to pretend to comment. But can I put myself in a situation where I'm in front of a MAGA person and they're just being ridiculous, and I think I don't have any room to negotiate with these people? I don't. Yeah, I can see that. My problem is, and I don't want to accuse this Hey, It's Twig person of doing this, but when I see stuff like this, it makes me immediately suspicious of like, were you looking to do this and jump into it before anything even got started? And by the way, I have that same suspicion about the woman, you know, who obviously seems like a Trump supporter too. And so is there that aspect that I talked about before, like, yeah, where you have to be assertive? Yes, but on the other end of that, it's like, are either of these people attempting at all to sit down with each other and have a conversation? At all. I'm not saying that every person could. I'm not ever saying that every person couldn't. I'm not saying every person will be worth a try to do that. I'm not saying every person won't. But the point is, like, that whole thing of, like, sometimes you have to be really assertive, that's the last straw, right? So there has to be a combination in that nuance of, like, when do we do this, knowing it's necessary, but only doing it truly when it is necessary and not going in looking to do these things, okay? And I think that's the huge difference of, like, are you doing certain things because you've tried and you've reached a point and now you have to be like, well, I have to do something to try to sell my political movement, or I'm just going to look like I'm getting run over. Even then, though, there's still a conversation of like, how well does this sell to independent voters, right? Because you see those kind of videos right there. Guarantee you, both sides see that video. The person who I assume is a Trump supporter and the hey, it's Twig person. Guess who agrees with them? Their own sides. But what does this do for independent people? I'm really not sure. I'm really not sure that independent people are going to look at this and be like, who are, independent, relatively apolitical, or maybe getting into politics, and they're going to think like, yeah, this really sold me on the left, or this really sold me on the right. It's just, I'm not convinced this is a good idea. Second, or the other point I want to make here too, though, is I just want to be clear, it's not always equal, right? Like, if you're some kind of like leftist protester doing something versus like the president of the United States, who is currently like obviously the leader of the MAGA movement, if Trump does something bad and the other person does bad, one just is worse because of the power one person has, like on an individual level. Now, if you want to start getting into like, well, yeah, but if they're all the collective, they're all powerful and arguably even more powerful. I understand that. Totally get it. But from an individual level at the same time, again, two things can exist at the same time. Individually, it's just obviously worse if Trump does something versus if like a citizen does something. And that would be true for whoever's in power. So there's that aspect of it. And then I want to show you this third thing too. And this is from Dave Rubin. So Rubin here is talking to, Mike Israetel. So those of you who don't know Dr. Mike Israetel, he's a really big, just like fitness guy. I think he might be an exercise scientist. That might be his official title. But I haven't listened to all this, like at 46 minutes in. But when you look at these comments some of these comments down here, let's see if we can look at a couple of these. So like this guy right here, or girl or whatever. Sorry, Dave, appreciate you, but question this person's advice. Dave, why did you interview this guy? What's the reason? Seriously, what was the purpose? Debunking Maha? Don't get it. Disappointed. And so, like, look, I'm not trying to be exaggerating in my tone, just kind of reading that for reading that way for entertainment purposes, or just how it came across. I don't know the tone of this person, right? That's part of the problem with these communications sometimes too, is you can't tell the tone. But this person, like, I look at this, huge red flag, because they're basically asking, like, why would you host something that attempts to debunk Maha, which is another way of saying, I'm reading this as, why would you want to debunk something that I agree with? Why would you do that? I don't understand why you would even do that. It's like, what do you, that's how you grow intellectually. Like, what are you talking about? That you have got to have these kind of conversations with people you disagree with. You have got to. I would say even in the scientific community, I think it's fine to talk to people who like think nonsensically, but you have to do so in a way that is intelligent, obviously. But like these comments are like, what do you mean? Why would you again, they're basically saying like, why would you want to host somebody debunking Maha? It's like, because it's important to get other perspectives, because it's important to look at more than just Maha. Like, what do you mean? What are you even talking about? Right? And so like, there's another one down here. Let's see if I can. Here's another one. This dude takes steroids and you're going to take his advice. I don't think so. Listen, I got news for you. Those two things don't correlate. Someone having good advice and someone taking steroids are not do not result in some kind of negative thing automatically. Just because you take steroids doesn't mean your advice is bad. Just because you don't take steroids doesn't mean your advice is good. That's not how things work. That's not how logically they play out, right? And I think this is, again, going back to that narrative of like, what are we seeing in politics right now? I just have this huge fear that the problem that we're seeing is not lack of engagement, but actually possibly maybe even increased engagement. I'd have to look on the polls on that. But if that is true, increased engagement with unsophisticated thought processes, right? Quantity is not the same thing as quality. And so, is it great that people are being more politically engaged? Does the Piers Morgan stuff have a purpose? Maybe. Does the Hey It's Twig stuff have a purpose? Maybe. Does the online sphere in general have a purpose? Maybe. But guess what? We can't just have that without making it sophisticated. Otherwise, we're just going to be a nation that basically just crumbles because your representatives are representing the people. It's basically like, and I hope I'm not using this term incorrectly because I don't know much about economics per se, but it's basically like sort of like an economic thing in the sense that, like, if you want a product, the producer will produce it. So our politicians are a reflection of us. They are. So if you want better politicians, be smarter, think more critically, welcome in bad ideas. And on top of that, when someone says your ideas are stupid, it's not offensive, man. I'm not saying we should go out and call people's like ideas stupid. I'm not saying that. It shouldn't be the first resort. But I think I can listen to someone, have them fully say out what they're saying, and just looking at them be like, with all due respect, I think that's a really unintelligent perspective. And I think it lacks any kind of logic behind it. If you hear something like that and that offends you, you're too attached to your ideas. Hate to break it to you. You've got to separate yourself from your ideas. Because if you don't, you're never going to learn. Whether someone says, I kind of disagree, or someone says, I think you're a fucking idiot, both of those, as the receiver of information, you should be open to asking, that's interesting. Why do you think that? Now, I think I'll make a little correction here. If someone calls me a fucking idiot, probably I would get offended too. But if someone says so change this a little bit. If someone says my idea is idiotic, or if someone says I just slightly disagree, I'm going to be asking the question either way. Why do you think that? Now, I might say, wow, that's strongly worded. Why do you think that? But I'm still going to be curious of why they think that, because that is what it is to be open-minded. To be open-minded, to be a learner, is to take in criticism soft and harsh and to say, guess what? No matter what, I'm going to attempt to grow from this. No matter what. Now, again, does that mean that we want to do that as the first thing? No. I love cordial conversation. I love cordial disagreements. That is the goal. Okay? But if somebody is softly saying to you, I just don't think that's a very smart thing to do. I just don't think you're being intelligent right now. Right? I know I'm yelling, but honestly, I wouldn't like yelling. But if someone's politely just saying to you, I think that's kind of a stupid perspective. I think that's kind of nonsense. You should be able to listen. You should be able to listen. So we got to find that balance between, like, yeah, come at people cordially. You don't want to come at this right away. But if you want to be in a land or if you want to be a critical thinking person, you've got to be open to these things. You can't be so attached to your ideas. You have to be open to being wrong. And that means being nice to each other, first of all, because you want to keep that cordiality. You want to assume good faith. You want to assume this person might actually have something to teach me, so I'm not going to get fired up. I'm not going to get fired up. But if someone calmly says to you, I think that's a terrible idea. I think that's incredibly unintelligent. I think that's a backwards way of thinking. And they're not being rude. They're not calling you names. They're not yelling. I know I was yelling earlier, but if they're not yelling, you should listen to them. So anyway, I think there's just a lot going on here with the dynamics of all these things. So let me know what you guys think down below. Like, subscribe, comment. Patreon will be down below too. Please feel free to donate to that. If you don't have the money, don't want to, totally fine. Like, subscribe, comment, all that stuff still appreciated. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. I mean, is this an issue that you think can be solved? Do you think it's worth it to have these kind of fired up conversations? Just let me know. Thanks.